I grew up believing that love meant endurance. That if something hurt, you were supposed to tolerate it, especially when it came from family. No one ever said that out loud. It was just understood. In my house, emotions were inconvenient. Silence was preferred, and problems were handled by pretending they didn't exist. From a young age, I learned how to read the room before speaking. I learned which words would cause tension and which ones would keep the peace. Over time, that skill became instinct. I stopped asking for things. I stopped disagreeing. I stopped expecting to be understood. And everyone called me mature. What they didn't see was the cost. As the years passed, my role in the family became fixed. I was the dependable one. The one who could handle pressure. The one who didn't complain. So when responsibilities needed to be passed down, they came to me. When sacrifices were required, my name was mentioned first. At first, I felt proud. Needed. But slowly, pride turned into obligation. And obligation turned into resentment I wasn't allowed to express. Any attempt to talk about my feelings was met with dismissal. You're too sensitive. You're overthinking. That's just how family is. I started questioning my own reality. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe wanting space really was selfish. So I pushed my feelings down and kept going. Outwardly, my life looked stable. I worked hard. I followed the rules. I did what was expected of me. But internally, something was eroding. I felt constantly tense, even during calm moments. My mind never rested. I was always preparing for the next emotional impact. Family gatherings drained me more than long workdays. I left them feeling smaller than when I arrived. Still, I stayed, because leaving was never presented as an option. Then came the moment that changed everything. It wasn't dramatic. There were no raised voices. It was an ordinary conversation, the kind we'd had hundreds of times before. They were discussing my future. My plans. My timeline. My responsibilities. No one asked what I wanted. They spoke with certainty, as if my life were already decided. Something inside me snapped, not loudly, but deeply. For the first time, I realized I felt invisible. Not misunderstood. Not unappreciated. Invisible. That night, I sat alone in my room, replaying the conversation again and again. And a thought surfaced that I had buried for years. If I disappear emotionally, would anyone notice? The answer frightened me. Because I wasn't sure, I started paying attention after that. To how often my needs were ignored. To how quickly my boundaries were dismissed. To how love was offered only when I complied. The patterns became impossible to unsee. And once you see the truth, pretending becomes exhausting. I tried one last time to speak up. I chose my words carefully. I stayed calm. I explained how overwhelmed I felt. The response was immediate. Defensiveness. Guilt. Blame. After everything we've done for you. Why are you making things difficult? You're changing. They were right. I was changing, but not in the way they thought. That conversation marked the beginning of the end. Not because I stormed out, but because I stopped trying to be understood by people who didn't want to listen. For months, I lived in a quiet internal conflict. One part of me wanted freedom. The other part was terrified of losing my family. The guilt was relentless. Family doesn't leave. Family endures. Family sacrifices. But at what point does sacrifice become self-betrayal? The question followed me everywhere. Eventually, my body answered before my mind could. I became constantly exhausted. I lost interest in things I once enjoyed. Even rest didn't feel restorative. I was running on empty. And one morning, I woke up. With a strange clarity. I couldn't do this anymore. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Just truthfully. I didn't have a perfect plan. I didn't know exactly where I was going. But I knew where I couldn't stay. The decision to leave felt unreal. I packed slowly, almost mechanically. Every item I placed in my bag felt symbolic, proof that I was serious. When I told them, the reactions followed a familiar script. Shock, anger, emotional pressure. They said I was abandoning them. That I was ungrateful. That I would fail. Part of me believed them. But another part, a quieter, stronger part, kept me moving. The first few weeks alone were harder than I expected. Freedom felt heavy at first. Without constant noise, my thoughts became louder. I questioned myself constantly, but little by little, things shifted. I noticed how calm mornings felt. How my body relaxed without realizing it. How I could sit in silence without fear. I started rediscovering myself. Not who I was supposed to be, but who I actually was. I learned to set boundaries without apologizing. To say no without explaining. To exist without justification. Some family members eventually reached out. Some with understanding. Some with conditions. And that's when I realized something important. Love that requires you to disappear isn't love, it's control. Distance didn't make me cruel. It made me honest. Today, my life is quieter. But it's real. I'm no longer living in survival mode. I'm no longer negotiating my worth. If you're listening to this and feeling trapped between loyalty and self-respect, hear this clearly. You are not broken for wanting peace. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. And you are not wrong for walking away from what hurts you. Sometimes, the bravest act of love is leaving the place that never truly saw you.